Afternoon. Welcome to another HUD EIV system training. My name is Nicole Faison with the Office of Public and Indian Housing, and I apologize for the delay in the start of this webcast this afternoon. Today's training is going to be focusing on initial EIV system training, basically letting you know how to use EIV from A to Z. So let's get into today's agenda with our overview of the EIV system, access to the EIV system, how to use the EIV system in your day-to-day operations, and then we'll also show you how to utilize the multiple subsidy report, as well as the existing tenant search identity verification report, and everybody's favorite, the income discrepancy report, the deceased tenants report. Well, we talked about this a little bit yesterday, but we'll show you that report as well today. And then another report that is new in EIV that most folks have not started utilizing, we'll share with you the immigration report. And then we'll have an EIV system questions and answers. So for those of you that may have questions, we will be showing an email address as well as a telephone number by which you can call in or email your questions, and we'll answer during this segment. So without further ado, let's get into the EIV system overview. A lot of folks want to know exactly what is the EIV system. So this segment of the training is going to focusing on EIV System Basics. So what is an upfront income verification, or what is the EIV system? We classify EIV as an upfront income verification tool, and if you'll notice here, it's available to all program administrators who administer the public housing, the Housing Choice Voucher, as well as various PIH Section 8 programs such as project-based vouchers. And this system is designed to allow housing authorities to validate tenant-reported wages, unemployment benefits, as well as new hire information, Social Security income during mandatory, interim, and annual reexaminations. Now, as you all know, the EIV system is a web-based application which allows for you to access the system through HUD's secure systems. And it is also available to HUD staff as well as HUD OIG, Inspector General's Office. And we use this tool at the HUD level to do oversight and monitoring of program compliance, as well as getting statistical information regarding the program so that we can make informed decisions here in Washington. And then this system contains information that's obtained through computer matching programs with the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, also known as HHS, as well as the Social Security Administration, as you commonly know as SSA. And this information, the EIV system also contains information from you, the PHA community, on debts owed to PHA, as well as termination information for your EOP families or end of participation families who have left the program. So let's talk about EIV content and source of the information. The Social Security Administration provides HUD with the following information: death records, validation of PIC reported Social Security numbers, date of birth, as well as the names. SSA also provides HUD with Social Security income information known as SS, as well as supplemental security income, also known as SSI benefits. And a lot of PHAs seem to not see dual entitlement benefit information. Dual entitlement is a paid benefit that is paid to a beneficiary under another person's Social Security number. And typically, those are benefits in which a person is eligible when a spouse dies or the dependents of an individual who has died. The living guardian is eligible for benefits under the deceased person's Social Security number. EIV does contain dual entitlement information in the system, and I'll show you what that looks like. Please be aware that HUD has had a few glitches in processing the dual entitlement information from SSA, so it's not uncommon for you to be aware that your clients are receiving dual entitlement and you don't see it in EIV. So if you don't see the benefit in EIV, we advise you to follow PIH Notice 2010-3. However, the caveat for dual entitlement is that you have to have the claimant's Social Security number or the deceased person's Social Security number. So if you have an old benefit verification letter that your client may have provided you, you'll see that claim number, which is the other person's SSN. You would need to enter that Social Security number into SSA's automated service. So like if you were to call the 800 number or to request a benefit verification letter via SSA's internet service, you would have to put in the SSN of the claimant, which is the deceased person's Social Security number. Also, SSA provides us with Medicare insurance premium information, whether or not there's a buy-in, and we'll talk about that as far as buy-in for insurance premiums. Please understand that HUD does not obtain any additional medical insurances that may be paid by your clients. Most folks have supplemental insurance in addition to the Medicare. HUD does not get that information, so you would need to consult with your client to obtain verification of the additional insurance premiums outside of the Medicare insurance premiums. Now, the source of the SSA information is very simplistic. SSA has a database that contains information with respect to the benefits, and so we call that the SSA Benefits Database. As far as the death information that SSA provides us, that comes from SSA's death records, and this information is reported to SSA by medical examiners, mortuaries, and other entities who basically have knowledge of an individual's death. And so HUD does get the deceased information from SSA. That's how we came up with the deceased tenants report. Okay, now let's look at what HHS provides HUD. HHS provides HUD with data from its National Directory of New Hires database. Many folks don't know what this database is, but it's a database owned by Health and Human Services Office of Child Support Enforcement Agency, and they created this national repository of wage and employment information to assist local child support offices in identifying non-custodial parents who may have defaulted on child support orders, and so they use this information to locate where that non-custodial parent is working so that they can issue the writ of garnishment to collect the child support payments. And so HUD actually obtained statutory authority to access this database so that you, the PHAs, could have access to this information to identify income that you may not be aware of. And so HHS provides us with quarterly unemployment compensation information, quarterly wage information for both federal and non-federal employers, and then they also provide us with monthly new hire or W-4 information. If you all recall when you started working at a job, one of the forms you have to fill out when you start a job is a W-4, and that's a record of you being newly hired with a company. And so HUD actually gets that W-4 information from HHS, and they provide us with the date that the individual was hired, along with the employer information, name and address, and federal employer identification number. Now, the source of the ND&H information is as follows. Now, keep in mind, as I mentioned to you yesterday, the information that's in these databases come from specific sources. So for the unemployment insurance or unemployment benefits, this information comes from the local state workforce agency in your jurisdiction or the agency within your state that has the responsibility of generating unemployment checks to unemployed individuals who are eligible for those benefits. Your quarterly wage information comes from the employers. The employers are required to report information with respect to quarterly earnings and wage information for each individual on the payroll. And then again, your W-4 information, the source is the employer. So you'll start to understand why it is when I say that HUD cannot fix incorrect data. And we talked about this yesterday. The source of the information is the responsible entity for fixing incorrect information that's in EIV. Okay, and then your debts owed to PHAs and termination information. Again, the source of that information is you, the PHA family. Okay, now let's look at the EIV system functions. Basically, the intent of the EIV system is to identify tenants who We identify tenants whose identity cannot be verified. That's the first thing that we do when we do computer matching. We want to make sure that everybody who you've submitted onto the 5.8, we can validate their identity. And we'll talk about that in just a minute. So we're validating the identities of individuals. We're identifying tenants who are required to disclose a social security number. The EIV system is also identifying tenants who are deceased and no longer with us. And also, it's identifying tenants who may be receiving multiple assistance either in the public housing choice voucher program, project-based Section 8 program, multifamily housing Section 8 programs. And so there's a cross-match between PIH and multifamily housing programs to identify tenants who may be double-dipping and receiving multiple rental assistance. The system also identifies individuals or applicants who may already be receiving rental assistance, okay? So keep in mind, while EIV is primarily targeted towards current participants or tenants, EIV does have the capacity to identify individuals, applicants, who may be already receiving assistance, or identifying individuals who may owe a debt to another housing authority or had an adverse status when they left the program. So EIV does do a couple things for applicants, but primarily the system is designed for current participants. And so the other thing that EIV does, it lets you know when your tenant's got a new job. And we'll talk about that in just a little bit. And then also, if there's a disparity between what was reported on the 5.8 as far as income for the family, EIV will identify income discrepancies based on comparing PIC reported information with EIV reported information. So we'll talk about income discrepancies in a little while. Now, EIV also obtains tenant income and employment information, and these are the categories of the information. Again, quarterly wage information, including federal wages. Most people were not aware that EIV also has federal wages. Federal wage information is in EIV, along with the employment information, the hire date, as well as the employer information. Also, quarterly unemployment compensation, monthly SSI benefit information, along with Medicare premium insurance payments is included in the EIV system, and that function of EIV system is basically to serve as a repository of information for you to utilize during your annuals and interim reexaminations. One thing I love about EIV, and if many of you were using the Tenant Assessment Subsystem many years ago, or TAS, that system only worked when it was time for the family to be re-examined. So if you remember, you could go and pull the reports from TAS for these families due for re-exam in December. Unlike TAS, EIV has data available 24/7 all the time, so you can access this information anytime, any place. So if you've got computer, you've got data, okay? The other thing, please keep in mind, data available for existing tenants only is how EIV operates. There is no income information for applicants because HUD does not collect information from housing authorities about applicants. And in order for HUD to do its computer matching, what must exist is a current form 50058, and we'll talk about the matching process in just a moment. And the EIV system basically requests 2 years of information of wage and unemployment information from ND&H database, and then we get current SSI, dual entitlement, and all the Social Security benefit information and the last 8 changes. And so that information is readily available to you in the system. And this just goes back to show you that the computer matching or data collection process associated with EIV is contingent upon the existence of a 50058 form, and data is collected from Section 3 and Section 7 of the 5.8 form. Now, the household member, SSN name, and date of birth are collected for the sole purposes of doing the identity validation process. Okay, we use that to validate the identity of your tenant, your PHA reported and verified wages, unemployment benefit information, on Section 7 of the 5.8 is collected so that EIV can do the data analysis to compare the PIC reported wage, unemployment, Social Security benefits to EIV reported wages, unemployment, Social Security benefits. Now, HUD sends the SSNs, the names, and the date of birth over to the Social Security Administration, and basically what's happening is those 3 data fields are going over to SSA, and those fields are matched against the database at SSA. And so one of the things you need to be aware of is that HUD does a pre-screening of all data before we send it over to SSA. And one of the things that will happen is that if HUD determines that the information that's on the 5.8 is inaccurate or invalid, we will automatically exclude those individuals from matching. And I'll show you with your identity verification report and your immigration report how that comes into play in this matching process. But we're basically making sure that what we get data for is valid. Okay, so we don't send any invalid SSNs over to SSA. Also, please understand the alternate ID that you generate in PIC for an individual who does not have a Social Security number, who has not disclosed the Social Security number, HUD cannot match an alternate ID. It's not a valid Social Security number. So anyone who has an alt ID, we do not match. We cannot get any income data for those individuals because the primary key for doing the computer matching is the SSN. So basically what is happening is that we are doing a pre-screening process for identity validation process. We obtain failed identification errors, and again, these are going to be outlined. I'll show them to you in the report. We obtain deaf information from SSA, and then for anybody who's been validated, we then say, okay, if these Social Security numbers are good, SSA, give us all the income information you have in your databases about these individuals, along with any deaf information. And so that is what is returned back to HUD. And so our SSA computer matching process begins the 1st of the month and typically is finished around the 15th. So just understand that if you send in a 5.8 today, that 5.8, in accordance with our computer matching schedule, will be matched the following month, okay? The SSA information in EIV is updated every 3 months, and I do have a slide in here that reflects the schedule of the computer matching. The SSI benefits are modified annually. As we all know, this year there was no cost of living adjustment, but traditionally when there is a cost of living adjustment or COLA, the Social Security Administration will issue a notice or bulletin in October advising what that new percentage COLA is going to be and how that impacts the benefits effective January 1. And so when there's a cost of living adjustment scheduled, HUD will actually automatically update every single tenant towards the end of the year, with all information being updated in EIV by December 31st of the year, if it's applicable. So we don't, we're in September, so next month we should be finding out whether or not there's going to be a cost of living adjustment, and if there is one, EIV will be updated in December, no later than December 31st, so that once you come back from Happy New Year, EIV will reflect those new benefit information. So that's how that works. And this is the actual schedule of the computer matching. And this may be a little hard to read, but notice that we do our matching in batches. And we basically dissect the United States and we match certain states during certain months. So you'll be able to see your state and what month your data is going to be updated. Okay. Now, since I was talking about SSA doing this identity validation process, I want to share with you some of the identity verification statuses that you will see in EIV, and these are standard statuses. The first one being verified, which is self-explanatory. Verified means that the personal identifiers that were matched with SSA match, and your tenant is verified. So there's no further action required. If you see not verified, that simply means HUD has not yet sent those personal identifiers to SSA to be matched. You would commonly see not verified if you, let's say for instance, you send in a 5.8 to pick today. Once EIV picks that data up tonight, that status for the whole family on that 5.8 will be not verified because we just got it. So depending on the category of the transaction type of the 5.8 will dictate when we match that record with SSA. Pending verification. Now you all should know what pending verification means by now because you've been seeing it for the last 5 or 6 months. But in case you don't recall, pending verification means just that. Pending verification. HUD has sent the tenant personal identifiers to SSA and we're awaiting the results back from SSA. And once those results are obtained from SSA, then EIV is updated and you'll see, and keep in mind, as I mentioned yesterday, that pending verification status should be gone for about 98% of the families by October 10th, okay? Because we're in the process of doing everybody's updates in EIV. And keep in mind, September 27th is the date when the new version of EIV will become available, okay? Now, this is the error identity verification status you don't want to see. Failed. When you see failed, that means you have to take some type of action. And failed means that the personal identifiers matched against the database with SSA did not match. Something is wrong. Either the name is wrong, the social security number is wrong, or the date of birth is wrong. Now, do keep in mind, there are some caveats. You will be looking at the social security card and looking what's on your 5.8, and everything is matching up. But do keep in mind that sometimes there's some nuances with computer matching. And so as long as you have confirmed that the information on your 5.8 matches what's on the social security card, then just make a note of it in the file. And as I mentioned before in a previous session, there are instances where Social Security is issuing new numbers, new Social Security numbers that they typically would not have issued. And so because of the growing population, they have started issuing new Social Security numbers, and your PIC ID report is telling you that it's an invalid Social Security number, but you're looking right at the Social Security card and it matches exactly what's on your 5.8. And so I have made a request to the PIC team to either update the logic in PIC regarding the algorithm that's utilized to validate SSNs, or to rely on the SSN validation process that EIV conducts. So that will, you know, if they implement that, then that should help minimize some of the errors that you're seeing on your reports, which really are not errors, okay? So we are working on that. And then the last status is deceased. And you all know I love deceased people, because deceased people mean that a unit or a voucher probably will become available so the next family can benefit. And so we let you know that somebody is deceased by showing the identity verification status of deceased, which means just that. Your tenant is no longer with us, okay? And SSA, when they have the information available, will tell you the date that the person expired on, okay? Here's an example of an identity verification status. If you'll notice in the blue box, verified is the common status that you want to see. Here's your pending. Everybody should know or be familiar with the pending status, pending verification status. And then here, I just wanted to show you this screenshot, because if you never run the identity verification report in EIV, you will know that your tenant has an issue, because remember, when you do annuals and interims, you have to use the EIV income report. And this is a snapshot of an EIV income report showing you, notice that in red bold print on the EIV report, HUD is letting you know that there's an issue. And in this case, their identity validation status is failed. And if you'll notice, they're telling you they can't disclose Social Security benefit information due to a discrepancy in the date of birth. And at the very end of this error message is a date. that date listed there is the date of birth that SSA has on their record. So notice that here for Timothy, whatever date of birth you have on your records, on your 5.8, does not match SSA's. And so here what you can do is update your 5.8 with the information reported by SSA. Now, one of the common situations that I have seen and I have heard of, a lot of times you have a birth certificate or you have a driver's license or a state-issued ID with a date of birth that is different than what's on SSA records. So you can do, and actually what I tell folks, you can't fix SSA records. So what should happen is, in the interim, so that you can get your data for your tenant, you need to update your 5.8 with what SSA is telling you is the date of birth that they have on their records, and ask your tenant to follow up with Social Security Administration regarding the date of birth that they have registered on their records so it can be fixed if necessary, okay? And then here's the error message just showing you failed. This is what you don't want to see, because if it's failed, then that means you got to do something a little extra, okay? All righty, and then here's a sample of deceased. And this is actually a perfect record, and I know you can't probably see this screenshot very well, and I do apologize that the training materials in printed or electronic copy are not available to you at this time. However, we will be distributing that information either later today or early next week. But this is a perfect record because this 5.8 actually reflects that the PHA did an end of participation or action type 6. So this family I know is deceased, and I know that the PHA has done what they need to do, which is to do an EOP, because this is a deceased single member household. Okay, computer matching with HHS. Again, this matching process entails HUD sending data from its PIC database over to HHS, but keep in mind, the HHS data matching does not start until the conclusion of the SSA identity validation process, because we only send SSA validated SSNs over to HHS. Okay, and we only send over to HHS SSNs of individuals who are 18 and over. And the reason we do that is because the income or the earned income of minors is excluded, and HUD spends a lot of money on computer matching, and so it's a waste of money to pay for data of 17-year-olds, 16-year-olds, because it's going to be excluded. Now, of course, emancipated minors, we have no way of knowing who's emancipated. HUD goes by age only, and so if someone's under 18 and they're emancipated, we don't know that. So we would not get data for that individual until they're 18. And basically for any SSN that's passed the EIV pre-screening, the SSA identity validation test will then be sent over to HHS so that we can obtain the W-4 quarterly wage and the unemployment insurance. And the HHS computer matching typically begins around the 16th and should finish by the 30th. On average, the computer matching process with HHS concludes about the 23rd to the 27th of the month, okay? And then keep in mind that, again, we're obtaining new hire information for every individual who is over the age of 18, and quarterly wage and unemployment information for individuals over the 18 and over. For any HUD Form 50058 with these following action types: a new admission, portability move-in, as well as a historical adjustment. And this is what we do on a monthly basis, because keep in mind, the quarterly wage information is quarterly. However, we do match with HHS on a monthly basis, and that's basically to capture information for individuals who have turned 18 since the last quarterly match, or to get income information of individuals who were newly admitted into the program. So we wouldn't want you to have to wait until the next quarterly match to get the income information. So once you send in your new admission or your historical adjustment, we will match those 5/8 within the next monthly cycle. Now, the quarterly computer matching occurs during the 16th and the 30th as well, and occurs during the following months: February, May, August, and November. And again, we're getting the quarterly wage and unemployment information as well as the new hire information for everybody. So if you notice the pattern, every single month we're getting quarterly wage, W-4 information, because W-4 is new hire information. New hire information is coming in on a monthly basis. Your unemployment and quarterly wage information is coming in on a quarterly basis. Okay? And then your matching occurs for any 500058 with an action type of new admission, annual re-exam, interim re-exam, portability move in, portability move out. Other change in unit, annual re-exam, searching voucher, flat rent annual, updated, as well as historical adjustments. So these are all the action types that are captured when we do our quarterly matching. Okay. Now remember when we first started doing EIV, I said, please understand HUD has no control over the age of the wage data. And folks are like, well, that wage data is 6 months old. What am I supposed to do with that? Well, the intent is to keep you informed of information that is earned by the family or unemployment compensation that is received by the family. And so the age of the quarterly data is attributable to the timing of the ND&H data coming into their database. And so please understand that these time frames are set up by HHS, and understand that your state workforce agency and federal agencies are required to report data within the specific time frames. And here are the time frames. For your new hire employment information, employers have to report twice a month for electronic or magnetic medium transmissions, and those transmissions have to be 12 to 16 days apart. So they're basically sending information every 2 weeks. And then for those who are not doing electronic transmissions, they have to send the information within 20 days of the date of hire. So the new hire information is not an issue because that information is coming in literally on a monthly basis. But here's where the caveat comes. For your quarterly wage, federal wages, the employer has basically 1 month to transmit the information from the quarter end date. So for example, this quarter that's getting ready to end September 30th, federal employers have until October 31st to transmit the data. So realistically, in November, you will see quarter 3 2010 data for federal workers. However, for your non-federal workers, the employer has 4 months from the end of the quarter to transmit their information. So when this quarter ends on September 30th, they have until basically January 31st to get their data in. So quarter 3 2010 data is not going to be available to you until February 2011, okay? The quarterly unemployment compensation, however, is on the same time frame as quarterly federal wage, where the state has 1 month to transmit the data for the unemployment. And so unemployment compensation, you will see quarter 3 2010 in November 2010. And then this is a nifty little schedule that you may want to cut out and maybe put this up on your bulletin board so that you know when data is going to be available. Because basically here we're in quarter 3, which is July through September. You're not going to see information until November 2010 for quarterly wage federal and the quarterly unemployment, and then February 2011 for your regular wages. Okay, now let's get into access to the EIV system. A lot of folks have access to the EIV system. As of right now, the national statistics for EIV System Access is 98%. So there are a few housing authorities out there that do not have access to the system, and so you would want to focus in on this segment because we're going to show you how to gain access to the EIV system. And of course, for those of you that already have access to the system, this segment will kind of enlighten you as to what's the process if I have new staff coming on board, or how do I modify access, or what do I need to do to maintain my access. So that's what we're going to talk about now. And obtaining access to the EIV system is very simplistic. The agency's executive director or supervisor, team leads, or whoever the ED has designated to authorize EIV system access will basically identify those individuals who should have access to the system. And those individuals will then complete the HUD Form 52676, which is the EIV User Access Authorization Form, Rules of Behavior and User Agreement document, which will be signed by the new user and signed by the supervisor or the executive director who's authorizing the individual to have access. And then you'll submit those HUD Forms 52676 to the EIV coordinator in your local HUD office. Now, I do want to point out, for HUD staff persons, you are not required to complete HUD Form 52676. So for those of you that have been completing it, I apologize, I should have enlightened you that I have been advised that HUD staff people do not need to complete that form because we have our mechanisms already in place regarding system access, particularly secure systems. However, for PHAs that are wanting access, you do need to complete this form, and you can fax, email, or mail it to your local HUD office because they will need this form so that they can approve your access within the system. And again, we are going to be exploring possibilities of automating the form HUD, the form HUD 52676 so that we can go from a paper or paper environment to an electronic environment. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, this form is a PDF fillable form, so if you have Adobe, you can complete this form, and some agencies have converted the form to a PDF fillable so that they can complete it, save it, and electronically transmit it to the local HUD office in batches, and that's completely acceptable. However, do understand that HUD forms cannot be modified. So I know some people were trying to, put some things on there for internal uses only. However, for HUD purposes, we have to receive the form in the format that was approved by OMB. So, access the form from the EIV webpage or from HUD clips. Okay, and then your HUD field office, like I said, they're going to approve your access, and you must have a WAS ID issued by HUD in order to gain access to EIV, and that WAS ID also must be associated with PIC access. Now, you don't have to have access to various PIC modules, you just need to be able to have PIC access because EIV reads your PIC access, okay? And I mentioned this yesterday, and I'm going to say it again. Executive directors, supervisors, people in charge, please stop requesting your staff to disclose to you their user ID and password. That is an illegal practice. You cannot share your user ID and password with other individuals. So please stop bullying your staff and staff members. I know that it's a little intimidating when your supervisor comes up and says, well, look, I haven't got my user ID from HUD yet, so you just go on and give me your user ID and password, and then you can change your password tomorrow. That's a no-go. What you ought to say, and you don't have to tell your supervisor no, just ask them, what is it that you need from EIV? I'll print it out for you, okay? Because you cannot use someone else's user ID and password, so please do not do that. And some of y'all have been so kind to write to me and say, Nicole, my supervisor's trying to get my user ID and password. What should I do? And I'm going to tell you every time, you do not, under any circumstances, disclose your unique user ID and password. Some people say, well, it's okay if I give them the user ID and then I just change my password tomorrow or next week. You just can't do that, okay? So if you're having trouble, reach out to us, whether it's the local HUD office or HUD headquarters. We'll help resolve the issue because we don't want anybody using other people's passwords and user IDs, because you know what? If that person who you lent your user, and I don't know, there's no such thing as lent. How do you lend your user ID? Can I borrow your user ID and password just for a moment? Like, okay, but if you do that, okay, keep in mind, if that person does something that they have no business doing, that illegal activity is registered under your user ID and password, okay? There's no way for HUD to distinguish who did what. So if you tell me, well, you know, Nicole, I gave my user ID and password to Billy, and Billy went in there and did that. I didn't do that. And I'm going to tell you right now, we're not going to be looking up IP addresses and trying to figure out who did what, and this IP address belongs to this one and this one. Don't do it. Just don't do it. It's not worth the hassle, okay? All righty. So now once your HUD field office has approved the user administrators within EIV, and keep in mind, each agency should have a designated EIV user administrator, because that person is going to basically do all of the user administration rights, which we'll talk about in a minute. And your user administrator then has the ability to go into EIV, and for any user ID or WAS ID that's listed, they can then begin to assign roles as requested or authorized on that HUD Form 52676. And basically, the user administrator is generating an electronic request for the local HUD office to approve your staff's access, okay? One of the things I tell folks, please, look at the HUD Form 52676 instructions, because it tells you exactly what roles you need to have assigned to your user ID based on certain core responsibilities that you actually conduct at your housing authority. So user administrators, if you get a form and somebody's got down application processor role and an occupancy specialty voucher role, automatically you should know they don't need the application processor role. The application processor role is a limited role, but we're going to go through the roles in just a minute. And then also, your user administrators basically have the ability to modify access, remove roles, add roles, and also terminate a user's access within EIV. And then we always tell the user administrators, if you have public housing users, you must assign the AMPs or asset management projects to the user ID. So when you go into EIV user administration, there's a little pencil. When you click on, there's a pencil next to the public housing role, and you have to click the pencil to assign the AMPs, because if you don't do that AMP assignment, that user will not be able to pull any income reports by batch. They will have to pull them by head of household. Okay, now these are the various EIV user roles. Your PHA occupancy public housing role, which basically allows the user to access the debts owed to PHAs and termination report, the search for former tenant, access to all EIV income reports for families under their jurisdiction, as well as the various verification reports for public housing program tenants only. Now, the PHA occupancy voucher role is the same role as the public housing role. The only difference is it's for Section 8 tenants only, okay? Now, your PHA occupancy application processor role, this is a limited role. This role only allows for a user to do the debts owed to PHAs and termination former tenant search, existing tenant search, and view the multiple subsidy report. Now again, I have mentioned that a lot of times housing authorities have what I call click happy. And what I mean by that is when you have your mouse in your hand at the computer, when you see check boxes, you're just greedy and you want to check all the boxes. I want it all. And so you just check all the boxes just to be checking. But if you check the application processor role along with the other roles, EIV is going to get confused because the application processor role is a limited role. So the system says, okay, even though you have this other role checked, you should only have access to this small piece. If you have the occupancy voucher or public housing role, you do not need the application processor role. This role we created for housing authorities because they said they had staff who process applications for public housing or housing choice voucher. They didn't need to see any income information because guess what? There is no income information for applicants, but they wanted to check EIV to see if they had an applicant who was a former tenant or an applicant who is a current tenant anywhere in the United States. So the application processor role is a limited role which allows for you to do screening for applicants and not for income information, just for multiple subsidy or former debt or adverse termination information. Now, your program administrator, oh, okay, I'm sorry, we just went through that one. Okay. Your PHA user administrator, and we just talked about the user administrator. The user administrator is the individual who's doing all the EIV access, assigning roles, modifying roles, deleting or terminating access to the EIV system. You also had the ability to view user role history, as well as assign public housing developments to your public housing users. Your PHA security administrator allows the user to monitor staff access. So your security administrator is kind of like your internal patrol. They're checking the various audit reports in EIV to view your user session and activity and what data you're accessing. So if you have a habit of working like 1 a.m. in the morning, you might want to alert your security administrator, because if a security administrator is looking at the user session and activity logs and they see that your user ID is logging on at 1 a.m., they're like, well, wait a minute, business hours is from 9 to 5:30. Why is somebody accessing the system at 1 o'clock? You may want to let your security, hey, you know, it was me, I'm working late, I'm trying to catch up on some overdue re-exams or what have you. It happens. I can't tell you how many nights I've spent doing paperwork. And so if you do that, you just may want to let the appropriate personnel know, so that when they're viewing these activity logs, they're not suspicious that something inappropriate is going on. Okay. Your user access. Please understand, these various roles that I've talked about, you can have more than one role, okay? So you can have multiple roles. However, please note that housing authorities need to ensure that they have at least one occupancy user for each program that you administer. So if you are administering the public housing program, you need to have at least one person who is going to access EIV. Now, housing authorities often ask, how many users can I have at my agency? You can have as many users as you deem appropriate. Now, one of the things I want to encourage housing authorities to deviate from, because this can be problematic. If you have one person pulling all the EIV reports and distributing the reports to the staff, that's really not an effective process. What happens if Mary is out on vacation in Paris for 2 months? Does business stop? No. You got staff that still need to do annuals and interims, but they're waiting for Mary to come back from Paris, and they're waiting on those EIV reports. And so I encourage housing authorities that anyone who is doing annual re-exams or interim re-exams, they should have access to the EIV system. However, ultimately, it is your decision as to how you implement EIV utilization and who at your agency has access. I'm just concerned when I hear supervisors or executive directors tell me, well, you know, Nicole, I'm kind of leery about, you know, Sally accessing the EIV system. Well, why are you reluctant about Sally? Well, you know, Sally, she's a disgruntled worker, and, you know, she doesn't seem to be doing the right thing. Well, if that's the case, then you ought to consider letting Sally go on somewhere else. But if Sally is doing annuals and interims, she really should be accessing the EIV system. And if you don't trust Sally, why did you hire her in the first place? Because guess what? As a PHA staff person, you have access to personal identifying information. I mean, you've got social security numbers, you've got names, you've got date of births, you've got birth certificates, marriage certificates, death certificates, you got tax return information, you've got a whole lot of information. And that information could be very valuable to a thief. So if you're that leery about somebody who has access to that information, they shouldn't be working for you. So that's just something to take under advisement. However, just make sure that when you're assigning these occupancy roles to users, that they have a need to access this information. So if you have, maintenance staff, they maintain property. They would not be a candidate for accessing the EIV information. Okay, the user administrator also should not be the security administrator. That's like the police policing themselves, okay? So if you have the security administrator role, you should not have the user administrator role. If you have the user administrator role, you should not have the security administrator role. So you should not have those two roles unless you are a small housing authority, under 50 units. Now, EIV is going to be modified in the very near future that if you are not a small housing authority, if you check the security administrator box and then go to check the user administrator box, the system will not allow you to do it. So I'm just going to let you know that that is coming, and if you have both the security and administrator roles, when this new feature is rolled out in EIV, you will automatically lose one of the two roles. So I would encourage you to go on and make your selection as to which role you want to have, because HUD is going to automatically delete one, and it may not be the one you want deleted. So we've been telling you from the inception of EIV that this is the protocol, but again, folks are click happy and you just check all the boxes, but we're going to put an end to that, okay? All right, here's your user administration by users, and basically here is where you get to request access or modify access by clicking on the by users link on the left-hand side, and then you'll notice here you have the ability to search by either user's last name or user ID, and so again you have your alphabet down at the end there where, hey, show me all users that begin with the whose last name begins with the letter M. So you have that ability. You also have the ability to just search on exact match or begins with. So maybe you just want to list all your users at your housing authority, and so everybody at your housing authority, their user ID typically begins with the letter M as in Mary. So you could type in M and then toggle down to begins with and then display all your users. And so here's a listing of all the users at the housing authority. Notice that there's a checkbox on the left-hand side, and there is where you would make the selection of which users you want to update and modify access. And then these are various applicable roles that you would click on to add the roles to the user or deselect a role by taking the checkbox out of the checkbox. Now, the EIV user certification process is right around the corner, and do keep in mind that all users must be certified semi-annually. We used to be a quarterly process, now it's a semi-annual process. The certification process begins on October 1st and ends on October 30th. The next one will be in April, begins April 1st, ends on April 30th, and here is where you're basically telling HUD these individuals still need to have access to EIV, okay? And if you are not certified by the deadline, the system will automatically terminate your access to EIV, and so when you come back to work and try to log in, the system is not going to let you in. So the doors to EIV are going to be closed for you, okay? And if you have users who no longer, like for example, it's almost the end of the month, so if you know that Bob is no longer going to be with us come October 1, then you can do one or two things. Either don't certify him or just go into user maintenance and automatically terminate him. So, but do not certify anyone who you know is no longer with your agency. Do not certify anyone who has not completed the required training. And if you do not have the HUD Form 52676 on file for a user, you should not be certifying that user, because by audit standards, if HUD was to come in and do an audit today, what we're going to do is pull your EIV access authorization forms, and if you have 5 access request forms, we should see 5 people in EIV with access. Now, if we see 10, then we're going to say, hey, you know, Molly, where are the EIV access authorization forms for the other 5 people? So I just want to let you know there's checks and balances in place, and so this HUD Form 52676 is compared against what's in EIV to make sure that everything is okay. If your access should be terminated because you were not certified in time, unfortunately, your user administrator will need to basically go in and do the whole access process all over again, which is assigning the roles, and then your access has to be approved by your local field office. So you can avoid having to wait around for your access to be approved by making sure that everybody's certified by the deadline. Now, if your user administrator loses his or her access and he or she is the only one with the user administrator role, guess what? Boy, you just up the creek without a paddle. You're going to have to get in touch with your local HUD office and have them reinstate. And again, you have to go through the whole process all over again. So again, you can avoid that little snafu by making sure you're certified. And again, you have about 29 days. You have from October 1st through the 29th to get those certifications completed. And then notice this is your new schedule. Before it was 4 times a year in which users had to be certified. And so when you're certifying these folks in October, that means they're good for the next 6 months up to the next certification period, okay? And then this certifying the users is very simplistic. Just go to user certification, and then the easiest thing is to do is select all individuals who are pending verification. You don't want to, if you don't select those, then you'll see all, either those who were expired and those who are pending and those who have been certified. So just select pending verification, pending certification, and then click on the little link there, and the system will display everybody who's pending certification. And notice, you probably can't read it, but it says certify user. You just click certify user. So if you know that Bob and Sally and Pam are still at your agency and still need access, you're just going to click certify user, and it literally takes 3 seconds for you to click and for the system to certify the user. Okay, now the EIV access may be terminated in several ways. Do keep in mind that if you do not access WAS or PIC, or you become inactive in WAS or PIC, your EIV system will automatically, your EIV access will automatically be terminated. If the HUD folks determine that you are non-compliant with security requirements such as technical, physical, administrative safeguards, say they're out doing a review and they do an EIV review to make sure that you have all the applicable safeguards in place to protect EIV information. If they determine that you are not compliant, the HUD staff can actually go in and terminate your access. And then, as I mentioned yesterday on the September 23rd, if you do not access the HUD secure systems within 90 days, WAS will automatically terminate your access. And again, there's a new alert within WAS when you log in to let you know the date that you need to access the system again, or at the latest, to avoid being automatically deactivated in WAS. And then lastly, you can use user maintenance to terminate a user if you determine someone's no longer in need of EIV access or is leaving the agency. And then I mentioned this before, HUD will terminate access either at the local level or at the headquarters level. We do terminate access if we determine an agency is non-compliant. And so those are some things to keep in mind as you're going. And then termination, this is just a screenshot to show you how to do the user administration, in which you use user maintenance to terminate a user. And all you do is click on user maintenance, enter the user ID, and then you simply click on the button and it will delete their access automatically. And this is a process you can do if you're going to terminate EIV access. But keep in mind, as I mentioned earlier, if you terminate someone in WAS or PIC, their EIV access will automatically be terminated. So you don't have to go like into pick and terminate and go into EIV and terminate. It can be done at the front end by terminating everything in WAS, and so that just wipes everything out for them. Now I want to get into effective use of the EIV system, and here we'll talk about the various components in EIV. And of course, as I mentioned, the system is a web-based application, so logging in is very simplistic. You go to the HUD Secure screen, put in your user ID and password, and then, of course, the system will prompt you with these various warnings. Please read these pages, because a lot of times I'm guilty of it too, because if you're ever online and you're trying to get the new iTunes song or whatever, and you know Apple's, they want you to read this whole user agreement. I just want the music, so I'm just clicking. I probably sign my life away to the devil and don't even realize it, because I don't read this stuff. But when you're logging on to HUD Secure Systems, please read what they're telling you so that you're aware of what you are asserting to or acknowledging to, because if something happens later on down the road, the judge doesn't want to hear, well, you know, Your Honor, I didn't even know about that. And see, of course, HUD's going to say, well, it was on the page, you just didn't read it. So please be cognizant of that. Once you've acknowledged all the various Privacy Act and warning notices, then you're prompted to the login or the menu, system menu of all the HUD Secure Systems. And EIV is the very first one on the list. And I don't know if it shows up as the first one on your list. Does it? Does it show up as the first one? You know why? Because EIV is number one. Just kidding. I mean, it all depends on who you ask. I mean, if you ask Sally, she'll tell you, I'm glad that system is not working right. She don't want to do it, but nonetheless, EIV is number one. Then, once you get into EIV, there's these legal warning and privacy acts for PHA users. You can't read this little yellow highlight, but this is letting you know that initial EIV system training, updated EIV system training, and annual security awareness training is a requirement. And there's a little checkbox, so you can't get past this screen unless you certify that you have completed training. So it's really important, as we discussed on yesterday's training, that all EIV system users, before they even get into the system, you need to make sure that they're taking this training. Okay, you can't go get logged on to EIV before you do the training. So this training is geared towards new EIV system users. And of course, if you're an existing user and you need a refresher, this course is great as a refresher, but not mandatory. So this new page here is reflecting a certification that you must certify when you go into the EIV system, that you've completed the training. And there's these various other checkboxes, and these are saying basically you have a HUD Form 9886 or equivalent consent form on file that is current and valid, and then you're also certifying that you will not misuse the information in the system. Okay, and then notice all of your functionality here is on the left-hand side of the page, and so you just basically click on any one of those links to begin your activity in EIV. And then viewing EIV data for a household is very simplistic. Keep in mind, the primary use of EIV is to look at the EIV income report when you're doing an annual and interim reexamination. And so one of the things you'll find is that this report is a very detailed report that outlines, A, all of the family members, B, it's going to have all of the detailed error messages with respect to multiple subsidy, whether someone's deceased, whether or not the identity validation has failed. If in April 2011, it's also going to include if your tenant owes a debt or has adverse information being reported about them. All that information is in there. So anytime you pull up an EIV income report and you see red, know that those are red alerts trying to get your attention of possible issues that are going on with that family. The report does identify section by section new hire information, quarterly wage information, employer information, the Social Security benefit information, as well as any other SSA information that's provided through the computer match. And I love this report because it provides you with a historical pattern of earnings. And that is very valuable because sometimes you have clients who will come in and tell you, oh, well, you know, Ms. Faison, I'm not working right now, so you got to put me on a zero rent. Well, I'm looking at your history here, and you can see EIV, we get 2 years worth of data every time we match. And so you'll start to see a pattern, because some reports I've seen in EIV, they are very, very long, because some folks change jobs like they change socks, but you can see what the pattern of earnings are, okay? So it's just a good to give you an idea of what's going on. And I tell housing authorities, if you don't have an interim increase policy where you make changes in rent contributions in between annual reexaminations, you might find after utilizing EIV that you may want to reconsider that policy because there's a lot of revenue that you could be missing out on. And if you're administering the Section 8 program, you might be able to house a few extra families if you're paying less HAP for family members or household members that have more income than what has been previously reported. Also, I love the income report because when I'm looking at that income report and talking to the tenant, I get to determine whether or not I'm going to need to pursue traditional third-party verification. And if you've been following EIV and the new way of doing business, in many instances, you're not going to have to pursue your traditional third-party verification. And we'll talk about that in just a moment. But one of the other things that I like is that I like the EIV report is because it's all-inclusive. It outlines for you failed identities, it identifies multiple subsidy. Everything is all in one report. So if you never look at any of the standalone reports, that would be fine because all the information that you need for every household is on this all-inclusive report. Okay. How can I access EIV information? Well, you can do it one by one. If you're a small agency, you may say, well, I only do 2 re-exams a month, so I can just put in those 2 Social Security numbers and pull it. Or if you're a larger housing authority, you may want to use the by re-examination month feature, which I refer to as the batch processing, in which you can get multiple income reports with the click of one button, okay? And so do keep in mind, as I mentioned earlier, income reports are only going to contain data for individuals who have passed the identity validation process and if our data sources have given us information. And also, remember, if you have no 5/8 in PIC for a family, you will have no income information in EIV. So, got PIC, got EIV. Basically, that's what it boils down to. You'll get EIV if you got a 5/8 that has valid identifiers in the system. Okay, accessing the tenant information by head of household. Again, as I mentioned, all of your functions are on the left-hand side of the page here, so you're just going to click on the link to access by head of household information. And notice, we give you a few options on how to pull information. The easiest way to pull data is just pull by the Social Security number. But if for some reason you do not have the head of household Social Security number, then you can search by last name or date of birth. But I tell folks, work smarter, not harder. If you're going to do this process, just enter the 9 digits and keep it moving. Kim, okay? Now, examples of a PHA who have multiple housing authorities. If you're an individual that may work between 3 small agencies, it's not uncommon for you to have multiple PHAs listed in your drop-down menu of participant code. So keep in mind that if you have a participant code or more than one participant code, if you're searching by last name or date of birth, you have to select which housing authority. The system does not allow for you to go on a fishing expedition, okay? And this is just a summary of what you see. When you access the EIV income report, you will then be brought to the summary report screen, which lists all the information about the household, all the family members, the unit address. This is all information coming from PIC, which is populated in the summary report. And then also notice at the bottom where the table of family members, there's an identity verification status, which lets you know the status of each listed household member. Now, I have to keep saying this because I got an email message late last night, and a PHA staff person said, Nicole, we watched the webcast on September 23rd, and we couldn't help but notice that you emphasized that the certification page is optional. And despite the fact that you clarified during the training that it was optional, could you please again clarify that that page is optional? So, PHAs, I'm letting you know the certification page that's shown here on the screen, which allows for a tenant to indicate their agreement or disagreement of the EIV information, is optional. It is not mandatory. It is a courtesy form for housing authorities to utilize. We created this form because you asked for it. Forms that do not contain an OMB number and valid date are optional forms. That means you do not have to use the form. Now, you can require your tenants to sign this form as a part of your internal process, but HUD does not require this form. We're not looking for it when we come to do an audit because it's what? Optional. Gracias. Thank you. Optional. It's optional. So please, optional. And for those that just insist on mandating this page as a mandatory document, we are updating EIV April 2011, and we're going to put text across there that this form is not mandatory and that it is optional. All right. See, y'all get it. I hope everybody out there who's watching this via webcast gets it. It's optional. Okay, access to the income report. Again, very simplistic. Notice at the top of the page, you can see the burgundy and the gray tabs. The burgundy lets you know that this is the tab or this is the page that you're on. And so now we're on the income report, and when you click on the income report, you basically will see all of the income information for the entire household. All right. Now, notice there's a tab for income discrepancy report. So accessing this is very, again, simplistic. And hopefully, when you click on the income discrepancy report tab, it looks like this. No discrepancy exists. Because guess what? If there's something there, then that means, here you got it. You got to have a conversation with the client. And some of y'all don't want to have conversations with the tenants. And I understand wholeheartedly because I've been there. Y'all know my story. So hopefully your income discrepancy tab is blank. Also notice that these are all printer-friendly version reports, so anytime you see that little printer-friendly version link, you can just click on that. A new window will open up, enabling you to do a printer-friendly version report. Now, I do understand in some instances that some of the printer-friendly version reports, the pagination is a little off and prints blank pages in between the various pages with text, and we are still working on pagination issues. In fact, we're actually exploring the ability to have these reports pop up into PDF files with the intent of minimizing the number of blank pages in there. So we are working on that, so please do understand we have heard your concerns regarding the pagination of these reports. And then, as I mentioned, this EIV income report is an all-inclusive report which has your head of household summary information along with employment information, wages, unemployment compensation, Social Security benefit information, dual entitlement, Medicare data, and supplemental security, as well as disability information for each household member. And then information from the or actually information about the head of household is extracted from PIC. And this slide just lets you know the various fields on the HUD Form 50058 that are actually imported to EIV. And I'm not going to read those off, but as you can see, for everything that's on your EIV report, you can see the direct link to your HUD Form 50058. So that's why it's really important that we ensure that the data in PIC is accurate, okay? All right, and then also keep in mind that we also extract from PIC, as we mentioned earlier, head of household name, date of birth, and social security number, section 3 of the 5.8. Now I want to talk briefly about the W-4 information or new hire information. This section of the household income report contains all new hire information, and you'll start to see that some of your clients have a long new hires information section because it's going to list every time they started a job along with the employer information, and also it includes the state in which they were hired. Now, if that field should happen to be blank, then you need to basically, actually the state field really, it's not really important, but it is important because some of you all get kind of confused when you see the new hire information and you're looking at the employer information. You're like, well, we're in DC, but it says the address is in Kentucky. Keep in mind that the new hire information, that address may be of the employer's headquarters or, main building or accountant or what have you. So sometimes you can look at the higher state and see, oh, wait a minute, it says DC is the higher state, but this employer, the billing address or the payroll office is in Kentucky. Your wage information, again, this section is a comprehensive section outlining quarterly wage information, employer information. It shows you the quarter, the year, the dollar amount, and all the employer information, and the date that EIV received the information from the source. And it's just an example of wage information in EIV. This person works for Checkers. Everybody know Checkers? The little hamburger joint with the Cajun spicy fries. So here's Checkers. Unemployment benefit information comes from your state workforce agency, so we all are familiar with that. And again, we get the date when it was received. And again, here's an example of quarterly unemployment compensation as well. And then your Social Security benefit information comes from the Social Security Administration. So we're going to stop right here, and we're going to take a 15-minute break. For those of you that are viewing via webcast, what we're going to do is play some lovely music for you. And I love the music because yesterday it had me dancing, so maybe you'll be dancing during the break. And so the live studio audience will come back in 15 minutes. If you have questions, stop by and see me.